clear that I didn't judge him. You know, I know God is the only judge we have. I've just set the appointment up.
At the Clark County Courthouse in Las Vegas, Nevada, the trial of Scott Dozier unfolded, charged with first-degree murder in the tragic death of 22-year-old Jeremiah Miller, whose dismembered body was found in a suitcase. Dozier had a prior conviction for second-degree murder in a separate Arizona case in 2005. The events leading to Miller's demise were chillingly detailed during the trial. In April 2002, Miller met Dozier at a Las Vegas strip motel under the deception of acquiring ephedrine, a component for methamphetamine production. Miller brought $12,000 in cash for this purpose. However, upon Miller's arrival, Dozier allegedly killed him, subsequently dismembering the body and disposing of it near a Vegas apartment complex.
You know, since this all happened, it's kind of been, people think I'm some kind of hero, well, I'm actually not. I just, did what I thought was best in the time that I was given.
The suitcase containing most of Miller's remains was discovered a few days later, yet his head and arms remained unrecovered. Dozier's arrest occurred 2 months later in Phoenix, Arizona. During the investigation, it emerged that Dozier went on a spending spree after allegedly stealing Miller's $12,000, claiming to friends that he won it at a casino. Additionally, Dozier was linked to the 2001 murder of Jason Griffin Green, whose decomposed remains were found north of Phoenix. This murder was allegedly motivated by Green's threat to expose Dozier's meth operation.
He told me what he was in prison for, that he had, was accused of raping an 11-year-old girl, and he got 25 to life for it, and, I told him that's enough, I don't want to hear any more. I first, punched him a couple times. Still wouldn't shut up.
A former associate, Doug Powell, confessed to assisting Dozier in disposing of Green's remains. At trial, Dozier contested the murder charge, arguing the lack of physical evidence tying him to Miller's death.
Joe kept telling me he wanted to explain that he didn't do it, that he was being set up and all this stuff, and I don't know, I just got mad and then hit him and then I killed him. When I hit him and knocked him out, and then I took the shoelaces out of his shoes, tied them together, wrapped it around his neck, and strangled him.
And the prosecution presented witnesses who claimed Dozier had confessed to the murders.
After I was done, I was aware of what I was doing, and then I just put him on his bed and covered him up and climbed in my bed and went to sleep.
One witness reported seeing Miller's decapitated body in Dozier's motel room alongside tools used for dismemberment.
What happened to the shoelaces?
Flushed them down the toilet.
Okay. Now those laces came out of Ted's shoes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And then when you were done, you flushed it down the toilet.
Mm-hmm.
Why would you do that?
Because I'm an idiot. I don't know. Obviously I don't think right. I'm in prison for most of my life, so my thinking isn't really rational.
Psychological assessments depicted Dozier as showing traits of antisocial personality disorder and narcissistic tendencies, including manipulative behavior and an inflated self-image. He received a 22-year sentence for Green's murder before being extradited to Nevada, where he was convicted of Miller's murder and received a death sentence in 2007. After a decade in prison, Dozier opted to waive appeals and requested Judge Jennifer Togliatti to accelerate his execution. Despite delays in the process, a death warrant was signed, initially setting his execution via lethal injection for November 14th.
But you did in fact kill him.
Oh, sure.
And you intended to.
Oh, sure, yes. Well, if it's all right, I'd like to tell you where it started.
Go ahead.
All right, well, he was my bunkie, and I had found out that he was in prison for child molestation. That night, he was trying to justify why he did it, and I just told him to be quiet, and he would have to leave in the morning to find a new cell. But he continued to talk about it and try to justify it, so he was a little bit bigger than me, so I got down and I hit him in his face a few times, and when he fell, I wrapped a cord around his neck and I took his life.
However, his legal team raised concerns about potential issues with the drug cocktail used in lethal injection, leading to further postponements.
How do you wish to plead to the second count of murder in the second degree? Guilty?
Yes, sir.
And doing so freely and voluntarily?
Yes.
Doing so because you are guilty?
Yes, sir.
Dozier's appeal to hasten his execution faced repeated delays, including a setback caused by concerns regarding the proposed lethal injection method and drug protocol. The debate surrounding Scott Dozier's execution centered on the cocktail of drugs proposed for the lethal injection. Concerns arose about the potential suffocation caused by a paralytic agent in the mixture, provoking discussions in court. The defense cited the case of Joseph Wood's 2014 execution in Arizona, which lasted over 2 hours and was marked by visible distress and gasping for air. Dozier's legal team sought to avoid a similar outcome for him. Strangely, when asked about these potential side effects, Dozier appeared indifferent, signaling a desire to depart from life. During discussions about the execution and his perspective on the death sentence, Dozier displayed a disturbing embrace of his impending fate, expressing an almost affectionate regard for it. Scheduled for execution in 2018, further delays resulted due to a challenge by Alvogen, a pharmaceutical firm objecting to the use of its product, midazolam, in executions. Despite these delays, Dozier's mental state deteriorated, leading to a period of being placed on suicide watch. Tragically, on January 5, 2019, officials at Ely State Prison discovered Dozier deceased in his cell, having taken his own life by hanging from an air vent using a bedsheet. His apparent desperation to expedite his execution had driven him to this irreversible decision, concluding a deeply distressing chapter in the legal system. Brian Nichols' story is undeniably chilling, marked by his infamous crimes that shook the nation on March 11, 2005. He was already facing a rape trial when he orchestrated a daring escape from custody, triggering a tragic sequence of events. Nichols' escape led to a disturbing killing spree, causing widespread shock and prompting an intense manhunt across metro Atlanta. His capture came 26 hours later, leading to a list of 54 charges filed against him by the prosecution for crimes committed during his escape. To comprehend the motivations behind Nichols' unthinkable actions, one must dive into his past, seeking insights into the series of events that led to his dreadful descent into violence. Brian Gene Nichols' early life and education offer glimpses into his riotous journey. Raised in a middle-class family, Nichols graduated from the Cardinal Gibbons School in Baltimore, Maryland in 1989. He briefly attended Kutztown University of Pennsylvania, where his physical presence and martial arts skills earned him a reputation.
Those crimes were committed on March 11, 2005 at the Fulton County Superior Courthouse. And the evidence will show that as he sat at that table with his lawyer, there was a plan devised by a conniving, cold-blooded, remorseless, evil, and extremely, extremely dangerous mind.
However, Nichols' time at Kutztown was flawed by multiple arrests, including charges related to threats, assault, and disorderly conduct. His troubled past continued, marked by further brushes with the law, such as arrests for various misdemeanors during his college years. Subsequently, Nichols attended Newberry College but faced dismissal from the football team due to allegations of theft from a dormitory. After leaving school, he relocated to Georgia in 1995, securing a position at Hewlett-Packard as a Unix systems engineer. Over time, Nichols found stability, earning a substantial income and maintaining a regular presence in the church. However, his life drastically changed in 2004 following a breakup with his girlfriend, Sonia Meredith, who began dating a church minister. Nichols' emotional turmoil escalated, leading to confrontations with the minister and disturbing incidents that prompted concerns about his mental state. The most alarming incident occurred in August 2004, when Nichols reportedly forced his way into Meredith's home, bound her, and committed a violent sexual assault. Subsequently arrested and held without bail, Nichols faced a list of charges related to the assault, including rape, burglary, and possession of a firearm during a crime. During his initial trial, tension mounted, and Nichols' behavior became increasingly concerning. Despite warnings from friends and family about potential escape plans and indications of violent tendencies, authorities seemingly underestimated the severity of the situation. Even as Nichols displayed volatile behavior and was found with makeshift weapons in jail, authorities and prosecutors dismissed these signs as routine jailhouse chatter. As the retrial proceeded, Nichols' behavior turned even more aggressive, including mocking the prosecutors. Despite increased security measures being discussed by Judge Barnes, the trial was nearing its end, with Nichols facing the possibility of life imprisonment if convicted. The tension in the courtroom was intense, setting the stage for the critical jury deliberations that would soon follow. The series of events that unfolded during Brian Nichols' escape from custody and following acts of violence paint a traumatic picture of chaos and tragedy. Cynthia Hall, a sheriff's deputy responsible for escorting Nichols, made a critical error by not requiring him to wear leg shackles despite his recent discovery of makeshift weapons hidden in his shoes. In the holding cell, Nichols brutally attacked Deputy Hall, overpowered her, and seized her gun belt, which included a weapon and radio. He then proceeded to the private chambers of Judge Roland W. Barnes, holding several individuals at gunpoint. Inside the chambers, Nichols confronted case managers Susan Christie and Gina Clark Thomas, along with attorney David Allman. When Sergeant Grantley White, the court bailiff, entered the room, Nichols disarmed him and forced him to handcuff the others. Nichols, displaying an unstable demeanor, made it clear that he had nothing to lose. Despite the critical situation, Sergeant White managed to trigger an emergency alarm, alerting court security. Nichols then proceeded to the courtroom, where he shot Judge Barnes in the back of the head at close range. Upon realizing that the assistant district attorneys he sought were not present, he shot court reporter Julie Brandow instead. Sergeant White, who had been forced into a bathroom, transmitted the first distress call to responding officers, describing Nichols. As Nichols continued his rampage, searching for his rape victim, who was not present, he exited the courtroom, ran into an emergency stairwell, and encountered Sergeant Hoyt Teasley, who had just arrived at work. In the resulting confrontation, Nichols fired shots at Sergeant Teasley, who gave in to his injuries. The courthouse incident resulted in the deaths of Judge Barnes and Julie Brandow. Nichols fled the courthouse, initiating a series of carjackings to escape. His violent actions extended to carjacking Deputy Solicitor General Dwayne Cooper, commandeering a tow truck, and hijacking a Mercury Sable from Almeida Kilgo. Throughout the escape, Nichols displayed a chilling demeanor, ordering victims at gunpoint and creating chaos on the streets of Atlanta. The intense manhunt for Nichols, marked by carjackings and threats against prosecutors, became one of the most extensive and intense searches in Atlanta's history. Nichols' actions left a trail of victims, marked by tragedy and a city gripped by fear. The events surrounding his escape and subsequent manhunt showcased the vulnerability of the justice system to violent disruptions and underscored the need for enhanced security measures in courthouses. The search for Brian Nichols prompted a citywide lockdown in Atlanta, with an extensive law enforcement presence dedicated to tracking him down. Governor Sonny Perdue offered a significant reward for information leading to Nichols' arrest, heightening the urgency of the manhunt. The city was in a state of high alert, with officers, cruisers, helicopters, and roadblocks deployed across downtown and midtown. More than 100 state troopers, FBI agents, and various law enforcement agencies collaborated in the search, while off-duty officers also pitched in. The courthouse where the violence unfolded remained secured until authorities thoroughly checked the premises. The efforts extended beyond the city limits, with patrol cars stationed along highways and heightened security measures implemented in public schools nearby. Nichols' movements after fleeing the courthouse were tracked, indicating his possible use of public transportation. Surveillance footage and eyewitness accounts verified his path, including his presence on a MARTA train and later sightings at various locations. Nichols' actions escalated on the evening of March 11, 2005, when he attacked two individuals at an apartment complex before killing Immigration and Customs Enforcement agent David G. Wilhelm at his residence. His theft of belongings and a vehicle marked a dangerous turn. The situation reached a crucial juncture when Nichols took Ashley Smith hostage at the Bridgewater Apartments in Duluth, Georgia, north of Atlanta. During the hours of captivity, Smith shared her personal story, including passages from religious texts, which seemed to resonate with Nichols. Eventually, he released her, even offering her money to visit her child. Nichols's behavior during this period was inconsistent and dangerous, as he alternated between violence and moments of unexpected empathy. The standoff with Smith marked a significant chapter in the manhunt, showcasing both the volatility of Nichols's actions and the humanizing impact of Smith's interactions with him during the hostage situation. After 26 intense hours, Brian Nichols surrendered to the Gwinnett Police SWAT team peacefully, marking the end of the disturbing ordeal. The recovery of stolen firearms and Agent Willem's belongings within the apartment, along with the discovery of his truck nearby, concluded the search. Nichols's surrender surprised authorities, considering his violent behavior until that point, but his peaceful conclusion to the standoff was a relief. The turning point came when Ashley Smith made a critical 911 call, prompting Nichols to surrender. Smith, struggling with a methamphetamine addiction during the hostage situation, chose not to partake in drugs with Nichols. Instead, she shared her faith and life experiences, displaying the consequences of drug abuse, including revealing her own 5-inch scar from a drug-related car accident. Despite complying with Nichols's requests, such as driving with him and even preparing breakfast, Smith persuaded him to let her go to see her daughter, leading to the key emergency call. Smith's courage and actions earned her widespread acclaim, resulting in a total reward of $70,000 from various organizations and offices, including the U.S. Marshal's Office, FBI, Georgia Governor's Office, Georgia Sheriff's Association, Georgia Fraternal Order of Police, City of Atlanta, and the Georgia Association of Chiefs of Police. However, she credited God for guiding her through the ordeal, emphasizing the courage of judicial and law enforcement officials who risked and sacrificed their lives to bring the situation to a peaceful conclusion. The aftermath of Brian Nichols's rampage led to significant legal and financial implications for the state of Georgia. Nichols confessed to his crimes during a 3.5-hour video statement without legal representation, expressing a mission of revenge against a judicial system he deemed unfair to African Americans. His thorough confession played a critical role in his conviction. However, Nichols's trial was troubled and controversial. His actions triggered discussions about courthouse security, leading to reviews and recommendations for enhanced safety measures in public buildings. The incident resulted in a security audit and the dismissal of 8 deputies, highlighting the critical need for strong security protocols to prevent similar tragedies. Nichols faced a 54-count indictment, including charges of murder, kidnapping, robbery, assault, and escape. His defense intended to argue his mental incompetence during the crimes, leading to legal complexities and disputes over funding for defense attorneys. The case was projected to become Georgia's most expensive, surpassing $5 million in costs for both prosecution and defense. The financial toll extended beyond legal fees, with settlements awarded to victims' families. The county faced substantial payouts, including a $2 million settlement to Barnes's widow and a $5 million settlement to Brandau's daughter, incurred through lawsuits. Nichols's parents, unavailable for immediate comment as they were traveling in Africa, learned about their son's case through media broadcasts, leading his mother to contact Nichols' criminal attorney via email. The tragic events caused widespread repercussions, not only legally, but also financially, for both the state and the families affected by Nichols' violent actions. The legal proceedings surrounding Brian Nichols' case were marked by several challenges and complexities. Nichols' family, particularly his brother Mark and father Gene, struggled with the consequences of his actions. Mark expressed the burden of being associated with his brother's crimes, while Gene, acknowledging his son's mental illness, hoped for a juror's compassion, but also contemplated the contrasting fates of life imprisonment versus the death penalty. The trial encountered numerous judicial complications, starting with judges recusing themselves due to their connections to the murdered judge. Eventually, Judge Hilton Fuller withdrew from the case, citing concerns about fairness, leading to a change in the trial's venue. The trial faced further disruptions when Nichols allegedly plotted a second escape attempt involving assistance from multiple individuals, including his girlfriend, deputies, a paralegal, and his brother. As the trial commenced in September 2008, Nichols entered a plea of not guilty by reason of insanity. His defense team, led by renowned death penalty litigator Henderson Hill, acknowledged the horrific events but argued that Nichols was not guilty due to insanity. Hill presented the defense that Nichols believed he was engaged in a rebellion against the United States within the context of plantation politics, portraying Nichols as a person in the grip of severe mental illness during the crimes. The trial marked a critical phase, where legal arguments centered on Nichols' mental state and his perception of reality during the tragic events of March 11, 2005. The prosecution laid out a harrowing narrative, presenting vivid and distressing details of the events that unfolded in the courthouse shootings. Playing the audio tape of the gunshots that ended the lives of Judge Roland W. Barnes and court reporter Julie Ann Brandow gave the courtroom a chilling insight into the chaos and tragedy of that moment. Brandow's recorder captured the sudden disruption of routine, the terror in the voices, and the devastating outcome. Nichols's admission to the shootings in a police statement was contrasted with the prosecution's assertion that he acted deliberately and methodically rather than out of immediate self-defense. Expert testimony from forensic analysts like Ross Gardner painted a picture of Nichols' actions post-shooting, implying manipulation of the crime scene, further reinforcing the prosecution's narrative of premeditated violence. The prosecutor's choice of words to describe Nichols, using powerful and condemning adjectives like conniving, vicious, cold-blooded, and remorseless, was aimed at hardening their depiction of Nichols as a calculated and ruthless individual who orchestrated the attack with intent and malice. The trial appeared to be centered on proving not just the acts Nichols committed, but also the manner in which he carried them out, aiming to portray him as a deliberate and unremorseful committer of the heinous crimes in the courthouse shootings.
He handed me some money that he had in his pocket, and then I just left. I remember walking out the door, my knees were still shaking as I got to the car, and I thought, this is too good to be true. Surely he's gonna come out and shoot me. But I got in the car and made it around the corner and immediately breathed a sigh of relief.
The prosecution's thorough presentation of evidence aimed to undo the defense's claim that Nichols was not guilty by reason of insanity.
Ryan Nichols came to my house at 2 o'clock last night.
Gail Abramson's testimony, emphasizing that she hadn't observed any indications of mental illness in Nichols during her interactions with him, was a crucial move. This testimony attempted to disprove the defense's narrative regarding Nichols's mental state during the prior rape trial. The extensive 17-day presentation, featuring 76 witnesses and concluding with the display of autopsy photos, aimed to emphasize the severity of the crimes and the tragic loss of life. By showcasing the devastating aftermath through these images, the prosecution sought to cement the severity of Nichols' actions and the impact they had on his victims. Despite the challenges, the prosecution appeared prepared to uphold the full weight of the law and seek justice for the victims through the legal process. Testimony and evidence that aimed to illustrate Brian Nichols' deteriorating mental state leading up to the crimes. By calling Nichols' former girlfriend, they wanted to depict how the breakup triggered a severe reaction from him, highlighting an incident of violence and mental instability that followed. This testimony aimed to portray Nichols as mentally unraveling after the relationship ended, emphasizing his distress and unreliable behavior. Attorney Barry Hazen's testimony added weight to this portrayal by recounting his conversation with Judge Barnes about Nichols's increasingly concerning behavior. Hazen's insights, suggesting Judge Barnes's cautionary advice about Nichols's unpredictable nature, aimed to emphasize Nichols's deteriorating mental condition. Additionally, The defense's presentation of psychiatrist Mark Cunningham aimed to establish a trajectory of Nichols's mental state. Cunningham's examination of Nichols's earlier writings, outlining beliefs of racial oppression and the necessity of violence, was used to suggest the development of a delusional disorder over time. Ultimately, the defense aimed to construct a narrative that Nichols's mental health deteriorated significantly, potentially to the point of a delusional disorder, which affected his capacity to understand the consequences of his actions, thereby arguing for diminished responsibility or insanity at the time of the crimes. The details surrounding Brian Nichols' upbringing and his descent into a delusional state shed light on the complex factors contributing to his actions. His writings and confessions revealed a deeply inaccurate perception of racial oppression, government, and violence, indicating a belief system that became increasingly disconnected from reality. He wrote in his essay, "If violence can be a righteous tool for the white man, then surely it can be used as a righteous tool for the black man. If violence can be used to murder defenseless women and children in South Africa and Vietnam, then surely it can be used to defend the human rights of dark-skinned people all over the world."
I think I was delusional. I think that drugs and alcohol played a part in those delusions. If there's something that someone could take away from this talk, it will be to recognize and understand the harm that marijuana can do.
Nichols's confession of feeling like a slave rebelling against the government and his biased justifications for his actions further highlighted the extent of his delusions. Moreover, the revelations about Nichols's traumatic childhood, including substance abuse, sexual abuse, and bullying, painted a picture of a troubled upbringing that seemingly carried significant psychological weight into his adulthood. The outcome of his trial, resulting in guilty verdicts on all 54 counts, highlighted the severity of his crimes. Despite facing numerous life sentences without the possibility of parole, the absence of a unanimous decision among jurors spared him from multiple death sentences, as required by Georgia law in capital cases. Brian Nichols's case stands as a complex portrayal of a series of tragic events influenced by a troubled past, delusional beliefs, and a deeply disturbed mental state. The conclusion of these factors ultimately resulted in a life behind bars for a man whose actions shook the city of Atlanta and left a profound impact on the lives of many.
I don't want to cause any more damage than what I have already done, and that's the main reason why I've always remained quiet. I did some very bad things. I pray and I ask for forgiveness.
The aftermath of such a devastating series of events leaves wounds that time can only hope to heal, never fully erase. The families of the victims struggle with the immense loss and pain caused by Nichols' actions. While the verdict might have provided a sense of closure and justice served, it can never compensate for the profound grief and void left by the lives taken.
He's in a cell that stretches this far. That's it. He doesn't have to get out of his bed to reach to the other side. He cannot even exercise on the floor. He can't lay down and exercise. He gets out 3 times a week for a shower. That's his life for the rest of his life.
Nichols' attempt to attribute his actions to drugs might signify a recognition of the role substances played in clouding his judgment. However, it's apparent that the consequences of his choices inflicted permanent damage. The scars of this tragedy remain imprinted in the memories of those affected, a constant reminder of lives shattered and futures forever altered. As time progresses, the hope is that healing and resilience prevail, but the impact of such a profound loss will never fade entirely.
Brian was active in the church. He had an excellent job. He lived in a very upscale community. It's something that none of us would have expected. And Brian, when he looks back on it, can't believe that he did it.
Crimes were committed on March 11th, 2005 at the Fulton County Superior Courthouse. And the evidence will show that as he sat at that table with his lawyer, there was a plan devised by a conniving, cold-blooded, remorseless, evil, and extremely, extremely dangerous mind.
If I could go back and do things differently, of course I would. I can't play the hand that I wish I was dealt. I have to play the hand that I have.
In the following case, we turn our attention to Butler County, where a man once again betrayed the trust of those placed in his care. Dan Broxterman, a former pastor and singer, was arrested on charges of rape involving multiple children. This 56-year-old man was indicted by a Butler County grand jury in 2019, facing charges that included rape, gross sexual imposition, and distributing harmful material to juveniles. The loved ones of two victims, who chose to remain anonymous to protect the children, came forward with their stories. One of them revealed that his daughter was only 7 years old when the abuse began, while the other shared that their loved one was just 4 years old at the time of the assaults. The victims disclosed that the abuse occurred between 2014 and 2019, a 5-year period during which the victims endured unimaginable suffering. The harm inflicted upon these young individuals was intense. The relatives of the victims expressed the lasting impact the abuse had on the children, with one parent sharing that his daughter now lives in fear of Broxterman and struggles with severe mental health issues. Dan Broxterman had presented himself as an ordained pastor and, alongside his wife, assisted with a church daycare while also caring for children in their home. He was a pastor in a church that has since closed. This allowed him to have access to children under the guise of protecting them. Following years of abuse, some of the victims found the courage to come forward. They confided in their parents and reported the incidents to the police, recounting how Broxterman had inappropriately touched them while they were under his care, at times even in public park restrooms. Tammy Mercer, a former member of one of the churches Broxterman was associated with, expressed her belief that he had deceived many people. Her suspicions were raised when she discovered that he had obtained ordination online for a mere $50. Mercer also revealed that he had allowed teenagers to sleep over at the church and engage in inappropriate activity, which raised serious concerns about his character and behavior. It was also discovered that this was not Broxterman's first encounter with the law. He had previously been found guilty of gross sexual imposition in 1990 and 1994, with his own daughter, Jessica Hubert, being one of his earliest victims when she was only 3 years old. The entire revelation stemming from this case was heartbreaking and shed light on the horrifying acts committed against vulnerable children. Broxterman was finally found guilty by the court and was sentenced to 20 years to life. As the verdict was read, Broxterman remained still and showed no emotion, the face of a man who had committed unspeakable acts and was rightfully being held accountable. He would also be registered as a sex offender for the rest of his life. The father of one of the victims expressed relief, describing it as a significant weight lifted off their shoulders and the entire family. He shared, "It is a huge weight lifted off of my shoulders and my daughter's shoulders and my whole family. My daughter's just happy that she doesn't have to see him again." Despite feeling that justice has been served, the victims and their families understand that this is just the beginning of their healing process. The emotional scars and trauma caused by Broxterman's actions require extensive support and counseling. Fortunately, organizations such as Bikers Against Child Abuse, BACA, and the National Child Traumatic Stress Network have offered resources to assist the victims and their families in their journey to recovery.
My plea of guilty to not guilty, and I'm withdrawing my plea to appeal. I'm withdrawing my plea to appeal.
A state Supreme Court judge lashes out at a defendant who injured a child after the man tried to change his guilty plea.
Judge William Bowler had a hard time hiding his anger at Marcel Brooks after Brooks tried to change his mind right before sentencing.
Marcel Brooks was involved in a disturbing case in which he was entrusted with the care of a toddler and, in a fit of irritation, violently shook the child, causing lifelong disabilities. Shockingly, this was not the first time that Marcel had faced such charges, as he had a prior charge for shaking another baby.
Marcel Brooks is a career criminal who, for the second time in less than 7 years, was sent to prison for shaking a baby. Devin is left with lasting medical issues affecting his eyesight and his ability to stand and use his left hand. He requires therapy 6 days a week. In this most recent case, Brooks was so violent, the child may never fully recover.
In this particular incident, Marcel was babysitting his girlfriend's baby, and when the child's grandparents walked in, they caught him violently shaking the toddler.
Seeing him in court today with a smirk on his face, it was like, I can imagine what other grandparents and parents would do. You know, you just want to go there and you just want to strangle him and say, why did you do this to this baby? This baby didn't hurt you at all.
During the court proceedings, Brooks displayed a shocking lack of remorse for his actions. He made jokes and was even caught laughing, which was viewed as shameful given the seriousness of the situation.
Because you, after a very detailed plea colloquy, admitted to me what you did.
Under extreme emotional duress.
No, you weren't.
I was.
asked you the questions.
I was.
He's a career criminal who had a prior shaken baby case before, and that's unconscionable.
In an attempt to avoid the consequences of his actions, Brooks tried to withdraw his guilty plea and engaged in arguments with his lawyer. He attempted to claim that the baby's injuries were pre-existing, asserting his innocence. However, his past actions painted a different picture.
I would like my rights to appeal, sir. I wasn't explained the consequences of that from my lawyer.
You were explained it to me in court.
Yeah, he told me I can appeal.
That on your conviction for the crime of assault in the first degree.
Sign it. I'll sign it on your behalf because you abused a child years ago. You admitted to me you abused this child.
I got video evidence that showed that he had the injury beforehand. September 29, 2016. The injury happened October 5th, 2016.
We'll make a note that you refused to sign this.
Okay.
I'm signing this.
You want to see these cases, these individuals go away to jail for as long as possible. And this case right here, we got him in jail for as long as possible.
Fortunately, justice prevailed, and Marcel Brooks was found guilty. He received a 15-year prison sentence, with the added restriction that he would never be allowed to be around another child in the future. This case highlights the importance of protecting the most vulnerable members of society.
A family grieving and looking for justice. Today, a former firefighter learns his punishment for killing his roommate.
In the Lake County Common Pleas Court, the case of Kevin McCarthy, a former Cleveland firefighter charged with fatally shooting his roommate, Christian Kilberg, in April 2022, unfolded. On April 14, 2022, McCarthy called 911 to report that he had accidentally shot Kilberg while the two were engaged in horseplay with a handgun after returning from drinking.
911, where's your emergency?
I'm out front.
Okay, what's going on?
I accidentally discharged a firearm and I accidentally shot my roommate.
Okay, does he need an ambulance?
Oh, he's dead.
McCarthy pointed the loaded weapon at Kilberg and pulled the trigger, resulting in Kilberg's immediate death. Following McCarthy's arrest, he was indicted in August on a charge of reckless homicide with a firearm specification. Initially pleading not guilty, McCarthy changed his plea to guilty on January 18, 2023. He resigned from his position as a firefighter on the same day. The sentencing hearing took place on February 22, 2023, at which McCarthy appeared in court with ashes on his head for Ash Wednesday.
Today, the firefighter who told Willoughby police he had accidentally shot his roommate has now changed his plea. Kevin McCarthy pleaded guilty to reckless homicide with a firearm specification.
Prior to the imposition of his sentence, McCarthy addressed the courtroom, offering a tearful apology to Kilberg's friends, his own family, and expressing deep remorse for the irreversible consequences of his actions.
Dashcam video shows Willoughby police officers arriving on scene where McCarthy was already on his knee.
Christian Kilberg's mother also spoke in court, conveying the pain caused by her son's death. The judge then sentenced McCarthy to a total of 6 years in prison, 3 years for the reckless homicide charge, and an additional 3 years for the firearm specification.
The courtroom looks a whole lot different than a church.
doesn't it, Kevin? One here is to condemn, and the other is to save. It's Ash Wednesday today. What you did was the gravest sin of all. You killed my son.
McCarthy, visibly remorseful, received his sentence with an emotional response, reflecting the gravity of the situation and the consequences of his actions.
With every beat of my heart, it is a beat of sorrow and remorse. I simply cannot explain the angst that is now ingrained in my DNA. Punch is a soulmate of mine, and I would never intentionally hurt him or any of his family.
And I have considered all aspects of 2911, 2912, and 2913. And as you know, with the firearm specification, it's a 3-year mandatory prison sentence. And on the underlying offense of reckless homicide, I'm going to impose a sentence of 36 months in prison.
Right now, we continue to follow breaking news in the Shawn Pernice murder case. Just a few hours ago, Pernice dropped a legal bombshell in court. He pleaded guilty to voluntary manslaughter in the death of his wife, Renee.
In the Clay County Circuit Court, Judge Shane T. Alexander presided over the case of 39-year-old Shawn Pernice, a Missouri firefighter charged with the murder of his wife, Renee Pernice. The couple, who were in the process of planning a divorce, got into an argument on January 2, 2009, after Renee discovered that Shawn had allegedly stolen money from her sister during a family Christmas party. In the course of the argument, Shawn struck Renee on the head, causing her to fall down a set of stairs and suffer fatal injuries. Shawn, a trained paramedic, did not attempt to save her life, but instead disposed of her body, making it difficult to recover her remains. Following Renee's disappearance, Shawn was arrested twice on unrelated charges. The suspicion of foul play surrounded him, but there was no concrete evidence tying him to the crime. In 2010, he was formally charged with the first-degree murder of his wife, and he pleaded not guilty. Shawn's trial progressed, and in 2012, 3 years after Renee's death, he pleaded guilty to the murder.
Kelly, he has been staunchly denying that he had anything to do with Renee's death until today. Now he says that he and Renee got into an argument on the morning of January 2nd, 2009. He says she fell down a flight of stairs after he struck her, and then she died.
At the sentencing hearing, Shawn, seemingly emotionless, gave a brief statement expressing remorse for his actions. He acknowledged the impact of his crime on his children and apologized for hiding the truth. The judge, after hearing emotional testimonies from Renee's family and friends, sentenced Shawn to 15 years in prison for voluntary manslaughter as part of a plea deal. Additionally, he received 6 months each for 2 counts of second-degree endangering the welfare of a child. Despite the severity of the charges and the emotional impact on Renee's loved ones, Shawn did not display any visible emotion as the judge pronounced his sentence. In the Newton County Superior Court, a deeply distressing case unfolds. A 27-year-old individual named Chris McNab faced allegations of actions resulting in the tragic loss of his 2-week-old daughter, Kalia McNab. The charges against him included severe accusations such as malice murder, felony murder, aggravated battery, and concealing a death. Kalia, born prematurely on September 23rd, weighed a mere 5 pounds at birth. District Attorney Layla H. Zone expressed, "That child faced insurmountable challenges from the very start, highlighting the upsetting circumstances." Zone elaborated, "From the moment she left the hospital, her fate seemed predetermined," referencing Kalia's departure from the medical facility in the company of Courtney Bell and Chris McNab. The relationship between McNab and Bell was troubled with chaos, marked by substance abuse and domestic conflict, an environment utterly unsuitable for a 15-day-old infant. Unfortunately, Kalia bore the consequences of this toxic situation. Initially reported missing from their residence in Covington, Georgia by McNab and Bell, the sequence of events surrounding her disappearance raised suspicion. Contradictory information emerged regarding their activities, such as their alleged sleep schedule and communications during the early morning hours. Subsequent findings from social media profiles and communication records contradicted their reported timeline. The distress escalated when a search party discovered Kalia's lifeless body in the woods, hidden within a drawstring bag that was traced back to McNab. The autopsy revealed that the cause of her death was blunt force trauma to the head, inflicting irreparable damage. Amidst the unfolding tragedy, Bell, distraught, provided a statement to the authorities before being released. Meanwhile, McNab, initially missing, was later apprehended at a gas station car wash following the grim discovery of his daughter's remains. Prosecutors asserted that McNab displayed negligence as a parent and displayed an unpredictable temper, alleging that he reacted violently towards his crying infant, resulting in her tragic demise. Courtney Bell, implicated in the case, was convicted on multiple counts, including second-degree murder. She acknowledged her struggles with substance abuse, but maintained her efforts to be a caring mother to her children. Throughout the legal proceedings, arguments and counter-arguments followed, with District Attorney Layla Zahn emphasizing the strength of the evidence at hand, highlighting circumstantial and direct evidence alike. The courtroom echoed with the tragic implications of choices made and the devastating loss of a young life. In the courtroom proceedings, District Attorney Zahn consistently argued that Chris McNab, a self-admitted meth user who frequently abused Bell, was solely responsible for Kalia's tragic fate. Surprisingly, Bell was charged with second-degree murder, a move that unintentionally seemed to absolve McNab of their child's murder. Despite maintaining his innocence throughout, McNab took the opportunity granted by the judge to speak his mind. In a rant that followed, he defended himself, claiming that despite his abusive behavior towards his wife, he would never extend that to his children. However, his arguments weakened under scrutiny. Continuing his emotional speech, McNab referred to his own abusive upbringing, but strongly denied ever subjecting his own children to such treatment. During an interaction with the judge, McNab, assuming a question to be innocent, unconsciously offered insight that sealed his fate unbeknownst to him. The judge, drawing from this exchange, gave a decisive verdict, seemingly influenced by the unintentional revelation made by the defendant himself. Courtney Bell, McNab's partner, had previously been convicted of second-degree murder and cruelty to children, resulting in a 30-year sentence with 15 to be served in prison and 15 on probation, along with an additional 10 years of simultaneous confinement for contributing to the dependency of a minor. However, this sentence was recently overturned by the Georgia Court of Appeals, citing insufficient evidence in her case.
All those kind of things. And you chose methamphetamine and McNab over a baby.
It's a sickness, but I tried to be a good mama. I love my babies.
The appeals court highlighted the absence of evidence linking Bell directly to the infliction of fatal injuries on Kalia, thus overturning her conviction. Similarly, Chris McNab attempted a similar argument but found no success.
It was simply that you created an environment that caused your children to be put second and Mr. McNab to be put first. As the state said in their closing, and they used the example of a rattlesnake being thrown into a room.
I mean, I got a lot to say. I got a lot to say, but I'm not going to be able to say half of it.
I don't know, because I don't know what you're going to say.
I'm innocent. I didn't do it.
Okay.
I've maintained that the whole time. I feel like there was things that were allowed to be said that should have never been allowed to be said that didn't have nothing whatsoever to do with the case and what was being said. Just because somebody has domestic abuse issues with their spouse doesn't mean that they would put their hands on their kids, which has also been pretty much proved that I've never touched my kids in any harmful manner whatsoever. I've never harmed my kids. I didn't even hear anything that said that I had done anything to her in front of the kids.
Following a week-long trial in Newton County, the jury deliberated for a mere hour after closing arguments.
I just don't understand how you find somebody guilty of doing something to a 15-day-old baby, because there was no evidence whatsoever that proved anything about me putting my hands on my kids. I've never done it, I never would. I don't believe in it. I was beat as a child, and I don't agree with it at all. And I would never do it.
The judge delivered a sentence of life imprisonment without parole, plus an additional 10 years for McNab, marking the conclusion of a harrowing legal battle.
Well, I can make a lot of comments on what you said. I can make a lot of comments on the trial, but I know that was just be arguing with you or talking with you. I'll ask you one simple question. You claim you're innocent, so you tell me what sentence the man or woman that you claim did this should receive.
If you ever find out who did them, they deserve to be under the jail.
Okay, so they ought to get the maximum sentence.
Most definitely.
On the crime of malice murder, I sentence you to life in confinement without parole. On concealing the death of another, I sentence you to 10 years in confinement, consecutive or after. Count one. Do you understand each of your sentences?
Big thanks to our viewers for joining the courtroom journey with us. Your interest in the stories of justice is what keeps our channel alive.